Hello and welcome to the India Hangout. Prime Minister Modi is travelling again to the United States, this time spending a lot more time, or actually time, on the West Coast, which is the first time that a Prime Minister would have visited in more than 4 decades. So it's a remarkable sort of visit indeed, but it also raises a whole bunch of questions, including a very fundamental one, which is what does it really achieve coming at a time like this. I'm joined by 3 people and we'll try and approach this issue from 3 different angles. Siddhartha Vardarajan, founder and editor of The Wire, Ambassador Neelam, also founder of the Gateway House, and Shekhar Kirani of Accel Partners, who will give us a flavor of how this connects, if at all it does, with the whole valley culture, and whether we can drive this or nurture it by getting government involved in it, particularly when there's something that's already doing well. So let's start with Ambassador Neelam and let's try and understand what this could do from a political or a geopolitical point of view. So why don't you go first, ma'am? What does this visit really achieve from your vantage point, particularly looking at it as a foreign policy expert?
Yeah, well, the first thing a visit like this achieves is it concentrates the minds. It concentrates the minds of the leaders themselves who will be in the summit, but also of the bureaucracies. So it will pull together all the understandings that have been arrived at in the last 2 summit meetings that the Prime Minister and the President have had. And it will bring a focus back to what it is that the 2 sides want to achieve, which is, of course, increased trade from the American point of view and attracting increased investment from the Indian point of view, and all the building blocks of these 2 major objectives.
Right. So are you saying that the building blocks for this has not been laid already? I mean, we've had one trip to New York. We had a big interaction with the diaspora, and I'll come to the diaspora bit in a little while, though.
This is not a job that's ever done. It's a work in progress. Even as we speak, I think they are beginning a strategic and commercial dialogue between the 2 countries in Washington, and there will be a meeting of the CEOs forum between the 2. So in a world where everything is changing, particularly the building blocks of economy, you need to keep on making changes to the way you trade, what you trade in, the new technologies, the new demands for intellectual property rights protection. So this is not a done deal. The 2 countries agree on various things, and then you have to put it in place by maybe enacting legislation, by changing the rules by which your own systems proceed, harmonizing the quality of products, etc. So these are all things which are continually to be undertaken, to be updated, and it concentrates the minds of the 2 bureaucracies to pull them along.
Right. Okay. Siddharth, I think so. Let me put the question to you as well, but with a slightly different flavor. So this visit, with all this focus on the West Coast, focus on Silicon Valley, visiting Facebook, meeting Tesla and all of that, against what is happening back home and the priorities as some of us would like to see them.
Well, I think the focus, the reason the West Coast visit is important is because it shows that Prime Minister Modi's focus is still essentially on the economy. And even his sort of supporters will have to concede that the visit he is making now in September 2015 is happening. The sort of atmospherics are rather different from the triumphalism which accompanied his visit this time last year. I think the enthusiasm of foreign investors, for one reason or the other, and I'm not getting into the merits, but the sense that we saw last year that here was a prime minister who was going to get the economy moving quickly, and who will translate into action his promise of getting rid of red tape and replacing it with a red carpet. There's been, a lot of, from their point of view, fine words, but things haven't moved quite as fast. We hear reports from individual companies who still have to wait for clearances of one kind or the other. Files are getting stuck. There's, in a sense, excessive centralization happening in the PMO, which is leading to bottlenecks of one kind or the other. And many of the traditional bottlenecks haven't been displaced or haven't been removed as smoothly as the international investor community had imagined or hoped it might be with Mr. Modi's arrival. So I think the visit this year, I think they will still be very welcoming, and I think they will still be very enthusiastic to hear him. But there will be perhaps a greater demand for him and the government to walk the talk. And I think this is the context. So in many ways, it's a rather more difficult visit because Prime Minister Modi has to, in a way, account for the fact that not a lot has changed on the ground in the past 1 year. There's been dissonance, there's been confusion on tax policy. The government has made announcements, and I'm saying this as an agnostic. I'm not, taking a position, say, on land acquisition. But the way in which the government flip-flops suggests that the government doesn't know its mind or lacks the confidence to do whatever it said it would do. So this is a handicap that Mr. Modi didn't have last year. And I think we would be looking for a very vigorous interaction in Silicon Valley to dispel some of the misgivings that the international investor community, the American investor community, has developed over the past 8 or 9 months. And that's a tough challenge.
Right. So let's ask the next question. Since this, a lot of this, there is a UN Sustainable Development Summit as well happening. Let's not forget that. But the flavor seems to be the Valley startups and what this visit could potentially do. So that's a good point to bring in Shekhar Kirani of Accel. So Shekhar, how are you seeing it from Bangalore, where I presume you are right now?
Yeah, this is an incredible opportunity for India and Valley to have kind of a legitimate blessing of already an extraordinary work that is going on underneath. So if you go to Valley or in Bangalore, there is an underlying philosophy that only way to make products and services accessible and available to all of 1.3 billion of India population and rest of the world in emerging markets is through technology. There is a fundamental belief, and there are already demonstrations starting to happen of these technologies in the Valley as well as in Bangalore. And in fact, Valley and Bangalore are so connected and so much of interactions is happening, but that is happening without the awareness of the government or even Washington, D.C. and New Delhi. This is an extraordinary opportunity for the recognition that the two technology hubs have a much more tighter connection and use this to legitimize the work that is going on, to enable and ensure that we can leapfrog the products and services that is required in India using best of the world and collaborate on that. And that is an extraordinary outcome, at least I'm hoping, will come out of this trip to the Valley.
Right. Shekhar, can I sort of ask you to amplify that a little bit? I think some of the skepticism is because that, even without Prime Minister actually visiting the Valley, so much has happened and so much will happen. I mean, there is so much capital flowing in from Valley investors into, tech startups in India, and will continue to because of the sheer opportunities that this market offers. The moment governments get in, doesn't that sort of fly against the, the fundamental construct of a startup, something that is anti-establishment in some ways, doing something that's almost under the radar, and so on and so forth?
Now, see, the work that is required to be done without involvement of the government has already happened. Mm-hmm. The amount of money moving from US to India to the startup ecosystem is already at a very decent size. And it is material in the sense that investors want kind of the sense of confidence that the government will protect the investment that is coming up and also make it easy to move the money into India and outside the India. So with that, so this mind share is very much required now to go and let them know that the ease of doing business that Mr. Modi has been positioning is extraordinarily important, and also position that there is a ground support for that money to solve India problems, whether it is in infrastructure, whether it is in telecom, whether it is in healthcare or in education, and use that money for leapfrogging in India so that the businesses can be built. And by the way, when exits happen, you can take the money back. And that cycle is important. And once that mind share is established, you will see a bigger market share for these companies to come into India. So that from that perspective, timing is appropriate and perfect. Where China is having a bit of a difficulty, and there is no vehicle to deploy money anywhere else, but India is still growing and is a very well regarded, well perceived country as a destination even today. And if that can be eased in these meetings, that's going to benefit India in general.
Right. So, Ambassador, I think you gave a you gave a sort of backdrop to the relations between the two countries, and you talked about how the mindsets need to, or the attention needs to focus. What could you sort of outline 2 or 3 critical areas where you would like to see some kind of action or decision emerge thanks to the second round of meetings that's going to happen now between these two countries?
Okay, but I do want to begin by saying that I think this visit that Mr. Modi will make to the Silicon Valley is actually quite important, because he needs to be sensitized, and that his programs which he has put forth, whether it is Digital India, smart cities, whatever it is, these things require a kind of government to allow various things to happen. And in India, it has always been the case that the government has been a sort of obstacle in industry making progress. So I think this is the first government that has announced that one of its program is to take up a lot of regulations and remove them so that they are not obstructing business happening. And that's important. I think in Silicon Valley, he will hear all this. And it's quite important that the whole structure of government begin to delete these things. On what will be the outcome from the meetings in Washington, D.C. of the strategic dialogue as well as the CEOs forums, I think there will be quite a lot of pressure to move forward with the bilateral investment treaty. Now, India has come up with a template which is quite different from what is the standard template that is often used, which has been produced by the OECD. Now, it is a fact that India has somewhat different requirements because we are at a very different stage of development than the United States or other OECD countries. But on the other hand, by always wanting to be different from every other country in the world, we actually generate obstacles for ourselves. So I think there will be pressure on that. I think there will be quite a lot of recommendations and pressure on the protection of property rights. On this pertains to a whole range of products, all of the IT sector, but also pharmaceuticals. So it is certainly my hope that we will stand firm on the pharmaceutical sector, where we actually are already TRIPS compliant, and it is the American and other big multinationals who are putting pressure, whereas the whole civil society and the NGO world supports the Indian ability to provide cheap medicines for the developing countries all over the world. So I hope we will be able to stick with that. But in general, the protection of property rights, I think there's going to be quite a lot of pressure, and we need to try to harmonize with the rest of the world, since we want investment in our IT sector from the rest of the world, but principally from the United States.
Right. Siddhartha, can I come back to you? Do you think that there could be some tough questions or tough issues that we could, sort of bring up while we do all of this, which includes the CEOs meet and the visit to the Valley? What are the sort of pending issues that we really need to be looking at from your perspective?
Well, we know that in the Valley, if I just stick to the West Coast for a minute, I know, we know that American tech companies are in part very happy at the recent change in India's attitude towards internet governance. Ravi Shankar Prasad, as communications and IT minister, has in a way brought India decisively into the um, multi-stakeholder camp, if you will, as far as ICANN, the future of ICANN is concerned. And the Americans appreciate that, and I think many American companies appreciate that. But what we have been saying and what Mr. Prasad has been saying is that, look, companies like Google and others need to think seriously about locating certain critical infrastructure servers in India. We know that companies aren't keen to do that, or if a decision is to be taken, they want it to be driven purely by commercial considerations and not on the basis of geopolitical concerns that India might have. So I think that's one kind of issue which may come up. And then, companies also are a bit wary about the regulatory structure. A company like Google, if it wants to establish a physical presence in India on, in terms of providing internet services, say through the balloon, whatever it is, probably would have to register themselves as a telecom company, and there's all kinds of rules and regulations of that which they're not comfortable with. So I think that Mr. Modi will probably get questioned by and will be asked tough questions by some of these companies about just how far is India prepared to go to bring about what he calls this digital India. So I think that's one set of questions. And I think as far as the United States is concerned, if they haven't already done so, I think Obama and his advisors are likely to register their disappointment at the failure of the NSA level talks between India and Pakistan. It's reasonable to assume that Mr. Modi's act of reaching out to Nawaz Sharif at Ufa, was in part the product of course, his own internal assessment, but also the counsel and advice of countries like the United States. And why that process never took off is something which I'm sure Mr. Obama would want to talk to Prime Minister Modi about. So there are various things of this kind. And we haven't really spoken about the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals issue yet, which, where if you look at the Addis summit, which preceded it in terms of financing for development, some of the issues that India raised, particularly about the importance of dealing with transfer pricing, these are issues where the OECD countries, the West, the rich countries don't really want to yield ground. They want to have maximum flexibility as far as taxation arrangements are concerned, which would benefit their companies. But India cannot afford, no developing country can afford to make it that easy for MNCs to play around with the tax jurisdictions. At some point, we all need to raise revenue in order to achieve our own development goals. And I think this is going to be one area where I think Prime Minister Modi will probably have to do some tough talking with other, but also with the United States, which is a key player in all of this.
Right. Okay. So the other question, which has, there's an objective and there's the controversy about the Digital India focus and the fact that there are privacy issues. And who should be, of course, asking these questions and who should be addressing them. So, Shekhar, let me come to you and ask you the, perhaps the more tech sort of leaning question. What does Digital India mean to you, as a technology investor and in a general sense? And what could a visit like this potentially achieve or actually help in terms of, let's say, either converging capital or resources or skills in that direction?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So for worldwide, Digital India, digitized country is the way how fast you can move money from people to people, from people to companies, and companies to the people, so that as the pace at which money moves and the transactions happen digitally, then the economy moves faster. And that has been a known fact for years. But in India, in a cash economy versus a digital economy, the underpinnings is what the Digital India is giving. With UID, the KYC part is taken care of. Now with the bank accounts being open for everybody, that is getting ready to the connected. Then once the services come with the money into the individual's hands, with the KYC done, services can be rolled over on top of this infrastructure to a level where the pace at which new services can reach nooks and corners of India is possible. And that is the power of Digital India. And this can't be done by a private sector. The government has a key role to ensure that the payment infrastructure is very solid, KYC infrastructure is very solid, and the movement of money from one person to the other person is solid. And once that underlying infrastructures are built, you can layer a lots and lots of businesses and services and products. And that is an opportunity where we all believe, at least as part of iSpirit and as part of Indian product ecosystem, that we may be even leapfrogging US in the sense of how fast the digital India is moving and the potential it will open up for services that is kind of unheard of in the next 3 to 5 years.
Right. Okay. So, Ambassador Dio, if I can come back to you. So, if you were to now look forward, this trip will happen, and there's a big NRI meet, like it has been in almost all destinations. The fascination with the diaspora. If I can ask the sort of somewhat cynical question, is it going too far, and is it really going to achieve what it perhaps aims to achieve?
Look, I want to say one thing. This visit by Prime Minister Modi to the West Coast is going to be taking place in the backdrop of the Chinese President Xi's visit, also with the same companies, the same IT companies.
Right.
Similarly, his meeting with President Obama will take place in the backdrop of the first official visit of the Chinese president to the United States. And this plays into important interests and concerns of the IT companies, which are trying to retrieve their positions, re-enter the Chinese market, and also of the US interest in balancing in our region. As far as the diaspora is concerned, I think the diaspora can't seem to get enough of the Prime Minister. I was in Los Angeles a couple of months ago, and it was already the subject of discussions with everyone that I met. I think that the diaspora hasn't been placed center and front by any other Prime Minister from India so far. So this is certainly going to pay dividends, and particularly the West Coast, where it is already, as Shekhar has been pointing out, so connected to Bangalore and to India. So I don't think it's overdoing it, but it certainly has a flavor which maybe can sometimes seem over the top.
Okay, Siddhartha, your take on this? I mean, is it a fascination for the diaspora that seems to, it surely feels good, but does it really achieve anything, which comes back to the first question we started with?
Well, the diaspora is important, and it's really important in a country like the United States, where the degree of political influence that the Indian American community has begun to exercise ought to be leveraged for India's benefit. And I think that previous governments have done this, but none has approached it quite so systematically as Mr. Modi has done. And I think this is one of the changes that he's brought about in terms of the conduct of Indian foreign policy. I think this time, of course, the wrinkle is likely to be from the Patel community, which has announced that it is going to oppose his visit and boycott some events, and they're going to find ways to register their anger at the manner in which the Gujarat government has responded to the demand for Patels to be included as part of OBCs. Again, not getting into the issues, but I think that this is one area where I think the one chunk of the NRI community is likely to be less welcoming of Prime Minister Modi, which is why I think, compared to the mood of September 2014, you have two important constituencies, the Gujarati NRIs and the US investors, who are perhaps not as enthusiastic today as they might have been a year ago. So, Prime Minister Modi, in a way, welcome to the real world. The honeymoon period is decisively over, and now you will be judged on the basis of what your government does, rather than on the basis of promises that you can make or fine sounding declarations. I think that this is a challenge and a complexity that the Prime Minister will have to deal with, on this visit.
Right. Shekhar, the role of the diaspora is important. I think there is no two ways about that. The sort of bridge between Bangalore and San Francisco and the Valley is something that has become only stronger over time. But are we sometimes overplaying this card, or do you feel that the more we play it, it actually works to our advantage as a country? Because finally, someone somewhere should be measuring outcomes and saying that all this effort should lead to something, whether it's tangible or even intangible.
I think the timing, as I said, couldn't have been perfect. With almost 18-20% of the Indian diaspora in the Valley doing startups. And if you look at every major technology company, at least 25 to 30% of Indian Americans being there as part of the contribution, and the power of that voice is continuously increasing. And now as the leader of this largest democracy goes there and gives a fillip to their mood, saying that hey, we are almost there to change India forever, and I need your help, and I'm here to support it. And if that intent is honestly expressed, and the diaspora knows that as a complex country as India, it's not easy to change overnight. The expectation of, they all run large companies. They know how difficult to change a company culture or a company to go in the new direction. But as a country as big as India, they will be patient, they will be honest. But the key question is the intention clear, and the effort being done is in the right direction, all being in the favor. I think this will be a much more deeper connectivity and much more euphoric for the Indian diaspora in the West Coast.
Right, that's good to hear. Siddharth, if we were to sum up, what would you rate this visit finally as? I mean, is it in terms of foreign policy, economic affairs, political affairs, bilateral issues, Indo-Pak? I mean, there are so many issues which typically swirl around. But where would you rate this visit in terms of what it could achieve at least this time?
Look, the economic, in the broadest, the political economy is the most important element here, quite frankly. You can see it in the West Coast visit, and his meeting with President Obama is bound to, the success of that meeting will depend on the kind of deliverables that the Americans, expect from the Indians, and vice versa. So, whether it's on the defense side or whether it's in terms of climate change, some give and take. I think that this is what will be very closely watched. I think that this is over and above anything else, it's an economic visit. And I would say what we know the least about right now is the extent of the agenda between Obama and Modi. I think what comes out of that meeting, if it's something significant, that will be the defining characteristic of this particular visit. And if nothing major happens, if nothing substantial is transacted, in a way that will cast a shadow, because this is a meeting that Prime Minister Modi has sought, and if nothing concrete comes out of it, then one is bound to ask, well, what was it all about?
Right, Ambassador, your last word on this. Two questions. So one is, where do you place this visit? Again, in the context of so many previous visits, including one to the US last September. And the second is the Obama meeting, as Siddharth was pointing out. What kind of expectations do you have from that?
I think this visit is going to be like the Prime Minister's 15th August address this year. The first meeting was euphoric. The second one was a kind of rendering of accounts, just as he did for the 15th August address, saying this is what they have been able to do so far. I think he'll certainly have to be saying both to the American business community and to President Obama that of everything that we discussed and hoped for, we have made some progress. So a kind of consolidation of the relationship that has been achieved in the last 15 months or so. I think that clearly, the euphoria of the first meeting is not there anymore. But I think also both the president and the business community are wise enough to know that exaggerated expectations don't get fulfilled. But it is important for Modi to be able to try and convince both that he is at least on the right track.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Ambassador Dew. We've run out of time, unfortunately. We've picked up so many points that each of them also deserve a further discussion and deliberation, including the role of Indians in the valley and how they could potentially contribute, or as they are already contributing indirectly or directly to India's economic growth story. That's all we have time for. Thank you all for joining us on this India Hangout, where we spoke about the upcoming Modi visit to the United States. We'll be back soon. Thanks for watching.